You know, the truth is that I've always been fascinated with the exact moment that an ex realizes they've made a mistake.
Like, I made a mistake and I realize it now.
So what I'd like to talk about today is not only exploring what culminates in that moment, but how to achieve that moment. So what are breakups really? If you really think about it, and you look back at, and I'm assuming most of you are watching this video because an ex broke up with you, meaning you were not the one to initiate the breakup. What is a breakup really? Well, I think in order to explore that, we need to understand what commitment is. Why do human beings have commitments? What creates a commitment? Simply put, human beings are not complicated with how they make commitment decisions. A lot of times it's as simple as a pro and cons list. We're trying to maximize the pros and minimize the cons. And usually the criteria we use is pretty obvious as well. How satisfied are we when we interact with that person? Is there a better alternative out there for them? How much have they invested into the relationship? If you score high marks in all categories, guess what? Your ex isn't going to be breaking up with you. But if you score low marks in 2 of the 3 categories, it's a high probability that your ex is going to break up with you. But at its core, if you really think about it, when an ex does break up with you, it's nothing more than them saying, I think I can do better than you. So whenever I talk about a concept like the grass is greener on the other side, it truly harkens back to this commitment aspect where they're literally thinking the grass is greener on the other side. But it's a 50-50 shot if it is, because ultimately, half of the time, they'll realize that it wasn't greener on the other side, and they realize they made a mistake. So what we're gonna do today is explore the psychology of an ex who's going through that difficult thought process in their mind. So how do you make an ex realize that they made a mistake in breaking up with you? Well, ultimately, I think there's an interesting time factor involved here. I just got done filming a video where I talked a lot about time, specifically with the no contact rule, and why it's such an undervalued concept to take into account. So a lot of times with a concept like the no contact rule, people are only focusing on, hey, this will make my ex miss me. But what they're not realizing is how your ex spends their time during that is a huge indicator for how they miss you. In other words, enough time needs to go by for them to explore the grass is greener on the other side. This kind of flies in the face of traditional advice, right? Traditional advice is like, hey, do not let your ex get close to another woman. Hey, do not let your ex get close to another guy. It's frightening to consider that, but I would argue it's important for them to go through that process themselves, and it's risky. There's no doubt that they could fall in love with that new person. They could find that the grass is greener on the other side, but I would argue most of the time it's not immediately. See, it's important for them to get this out of their system. Now, I'm not saying what they're doing is okay, and I'm not saying every guy or girl does this, but if you really think about it, if they broke up with you, they think they can do better than you. So that feeling will not go away until they actually explore it or try to get rid of it. Trying to get rid of this narrative they have in their head about, I can do better than you. So when they try to do better than you and see things aren't that easy, it doesn't come that simply. And then there's the aspect of regret. Regret is a really, really important thing to consider when you're making a mistake, because oftentimes we don't regret things until they've already passed. And oftentimes there's an aspect of opportunity cost involved in regret. Now, if you're not familiar with opportunity cost, it's pretty simple. Basically, it's the loss of potential gain from other alternatives when one alternative is chosen. We'll use our simple experience here of the grass is greener syndrome. Your ex breaks up with you because they think they can do better than you. They have made a decision. They, on the other hand, go and date someone new. It's good at first. It always is. That's the important part to consider here. A lot of times people think like, oh my goodness, my ex moved on to someone new. It's awful. They're so happy. And I would say to you, give it some time. They're in the honeymoon period. You can't really count until they're off the honeymoon period and kind of things level out. So here's where the opportunity cost concept comes into play. They are dating this new person who they seemingly are in love with, but once that honeymoon period comes down, the real comparison begins. And that's when the opportunity cost comes into play. Did they make the correct decision by going and getting into a relationship with this other person because they're missing out on all these other opportunities with you? And usually, regret comes into play when they answer that question, no, I made a mistake. I am with this other person, but I can't stop thinking about my ex. I can't stop thinking about all the things I'm missing out on with them. I can't stop thinking about all the opportunities that we had missed. Between a rock and a hard place. Because it's difficult to admit to this person that you're with that is seemingly in love with you that, hey, I'm not feeling it anymore. And it's also difficult because you realize you may have burned a bridge with the other person entirely. So oftentimes exes feel they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and usually their fight or flight mechanism gets triggered at this point. They either run away from both people inwardly, or they fight with their new person and that relationship gets broken up. So, we understand the complicated psychology for why exes would move on to someone new, or why exes would potentially regret breaking up with you. But what can we do to help them take an action to want to come back to you? What can we do to even make that feeling that, my goodness, I regretted my decision to break up with them, even better? Well, I'm going to tell you a story. When I was in college, there was a girl who sat next to me in class. She was very, very pretty. She was. But she was a bit heavy. And I, being just a complete jerk and very sensitive to those things, would not really give her much other than friendship. There's nothing technically wrong with that, though I will admit I was a complete jerk. Here's the important part to remember, though. She was very pretty. She had a very pretty face. She was just really pretty, right? But I couldn't get past that one aspect with regards to her weight. And this is awful. I admit this. She was definitely interested in me in a romantic level. She would often text me, and I would text her back very nicely, but just wasn't feeling it. And it was purely not based on her personality. It was purely based on her looks. Fast forward 1.5 years. We briefly talked. But we didn't really get into touch very much. I moved on, started dating someone new. She moved on and did something else I didn't know. Anyways, I'm coming out of class with my friend at the time, and we're talking, and this beautiful woman comes up to me. And she's super nice. She's like, hey, Chris, and I couldn't believe it was this girl. She had lost all this weight. She looked better than she ever looked before, and it was like the ultimate revenge on her part, right? She just sort of was different, not necessarily personality-wise, but looks-wise, and it definitely caught my attention as a 21-year-old kid. So the first thing I do, or the first thing I say, is my friend, we walk past after we have this brief interaction. He says, who is that? And I kind of explained it to him, and he said, hey, you should try to take her on a date. And I said, yeah, I'm going to definitely try to take her on a date. So I texted her, got back in touch with her, and asked her out on a date. She said yes, then promptly stood me up on the date. So she got the last laugh. But here's the important thing to remember. Something was different to catch my attention. Now, am I saying or telling you this story because you need to lose a bunch of weight for your ex? Not at all. I think what you need to do is do something different with regards to how you approach specific situations. I've been on record a lot of times talking about attachment styles and how that plays a role into breakups and relationships. A lot of times after a breakup, you are exhibiting lots of anxious tendencies. So one of the best things you can do for yourself to kind of create this different vibe to where your ex is saying, hey, something is different, something is new, is to literally get rid of a lot of the anxious tendencies, because that will make your ex kind of pay more attention to you. But ultimately, when will it be that an ex realizes that they made a mistake? Is there like a specific time frame that kind of like, oh, it's likely to happen on this month exactly? The truth is, it's different for everyone. And to illustrate this point, I went deep into the recesses of Google and pulled up an article by Men's Health where they asked 9 different men why they began to regret or realize they made a mistake after a breakup. And I'll take a few as an example, but you'll realize that pretty much every single reason that they gave for like, hey, I made a mistake and this is why I feel I made a mistake is everything that we've covered in this video so far. So to illustrate this point, I'd like to take a couple of examples from this article. So Vance says, months later, after dating and having relationship-based conversations with other women, I realized that I didn't give the relationship a fair chance or fight hard enough. In other words, He had the grass is greener syndrome. He broke up with his ex because he thought he could do better than them. And then once he started dating other women, he realized I can't do better than them, had regret, and realized he made a mistake after his breakup. That's one down. Let's go through another one. Adam says, I remember being in London, traveling alone after a breakup. As I was walking through all that history, I kept wishing I had someone to share it with. Basically, opportunity cost. He made a decision to break up with his ex because whatever, right? And it's not until he realizes the opportunities he missed that he realized he made a mistake. Because wouldn't it be nice to share this experience with someone else? Oh, wait, I chose this different path. Let's do one final one. Doug says, broke up with her because of the little flaws that bothered me. And then when I started dating other people, I realized that they had so many more things that were deal breakers or not fun to be around. Again, here we have the grass is greener syndrome. Like I said, breakups are nothing more than one person thinking they can do better than you. And when they realize they can't, that's when they realize they have this big mistake that they've made. But you want to know what I think the biggest mistake you can make after a breakup is? Not taking our ex recovery chances quiz on our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com. It's a simple free 2-minute quiz designed to basically tell you what kind of chance you have of getting your ex back so you know whether or not you'll be wasting your time. Now, taking this quiz is super easy. If you're watching this on YouTube, simply look in the description below and click the link you see there. It's that simple. It'll take you directly to the quiz where you can kind of get an idea of what your chances are and what to do going forward. Also, if you haven't liked, commented, or subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. Every little bit helps. I'll see you next time.